Why do your shoes look like they came from the trash? Madison's voice cut through the crowded hallway like a whip, sharp and rehearsed, designed to draw blood. Jamal froze mid-step, his eyes flickering to his tattered sneakers, the ones his mom had found at a church donation bin and carefully cleaned just so he wouldn't be barefoot. They were a little too big, the soles worn thin, but they still had color left in them. He'd worn them proudly. Until now, the hallway burst with laughter. Not just students, even a teacher glanced over with a smirk before quickly turning away. Madison stood with her posse, 3 other girls in pastel cardigans and flawless ponytails, each holding Starbucks cups they never really drank from. Her golden curls framed her smirking face like she was the princess of some cruel kingdom. I mean, seriously, she added, her tone dripping with mock concern. Are you doing a social experiment or something? Jamal didn't say a word. His 12-year-old heart pounded in his chest like a frightened bird. His fists clenched, but he wouldn't cry. He refused to. Behind him, his little sister, Amina, who had just started 5th grade, looked up at him, eyes wide. Jay, she whispered. He shook his head slowly. It's fine, he muttered, even as the burn of humiliation crawled up his neck like fire ants. Madison laughed and twirled a strand of hair. Whatever. You probably live in one of those tiny apartments near Martin Street. That place smells like spoiled milk. Jamal's jaw tightened. She was right. He did. But how did she know? A football player chuckled from behind his locker. Yo, leave the dude alone. He's probably saving for his next trash bag hoodie. More laughter. That was the moment. The crack in his soul. The silent vow. 10 years. That's what he gave himself, 10 years to become untouchable. It was exactly 10 years later when Madison's heels clicked against the marble floor of the Lexington Hotel, a 5-star luxury haven in downtown Manhattan. She was no longer wearing pink cardigans. Now it was tailored Prada suits. Her blonde hair swept into a sleek bun. She was still beautiful, still privileged, and still had a gift for walking into a room like she owned it. She was also nervous. Her fashion tech startup, Ethereal, was hemorrhaging money. They had one last shot, a pitch meeting with a mystery investor. Her assistant didn't have a name, just an NDA and the initials JD. As she waited in the private dining room, she checked her reflection on her phone, then took a shaky sip of cucumber water. Then the doors opened, and in walked Jamal. But this was not the boy with the donated sneakers. This Jamal wore a tailored navy suit that whispered wealth, a watch that could pay off student loans, and a presence that made the air shift. Madison blinked. Her mind couldn't quite process what she was seeing. I think you might have the wrong room, she said. Jamal smiled, calm, cold, calculated. I'm right where I need to be. She stood, awkward. You're J.D. I am. He extended his hand, but his eyes held no warmth. Jamal Davis, CEO of Coralink Ventures. The name hit her like a freight train. Coralink Ventures, the venture capital firm behind half the successful tech startups in the last 5 years. Her mouth opened, closed. You're the investor. I am. He gestured to the seat. Shall we begin? The pitch was a disaster. Not because Madison wasn't smart, she was. Her ideas were innovative, her team talented. But she couldn't focus. She kept seeing him, the boy she'd humiliated, the boy she had reduced to a punchline. She stumbled over her slides. Her hands trembled. Our main user base is, Jamal interrupted. Let me ask you something. Madison, she looked up. Do you remember the sneakers? The room went silent. Her voice cracked. What? The ones you said looked like trash. The ones you mocked in front of the entire school. Do you remember them? Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. Jamal. I was a kid. I didn't know, he said sharply. You were cruel and calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing. You needed someone to mock so you could shine. And I was easy, Right, the poor black kid with no dad and thrift store clothes. She choked back a sob. I'm not that person anymore. Good, he said, because I'm not the boy you mocked anymore either. She nodded quickly, desperate. Please, Jamal, I'm sorry. I was stupid, arrogant. You thought I'd never matter, he said coldly. But here we are. She wiped her eyes. Are you going to kill the deal? He leaned forward, his voice low and even. I'm going to do something better. Her breath caught. I'm going to give you the money. Her eyes widened in shock, but with conditions. What kind of conditions? He pulled out a paper. You're going to sign over 51% of the company to a nonprofit initiative I run, Future First. It supports tech education for underprivileged black youth. You'll still operate, but you'll answer to the board. My board. Madison's lips parted. You want to take my company? I want to make sure no other kid like me ever walks into school and feels like dirt because of a pair of shoes, he said. You mocked me for what I didn't have. Now you'll help others have more. She stared at him, then slowly, numbly, picked up the pen. She signed. That night, Jamal walked out into the cool Manhattan air. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just stood still. 10 years. Every late night, every loan his mom couldn't co-sign, every room where he was the only black face, every doubt, every rejection, every rage-filled study session. It had all led here. A voice behind him spoke softly. You didn't have to help her. You know, it was his business partner, Lexi, sharp, loyal, black, a fighter. I know, Jamal replied. Then why did you? He turned toward the lights of the skyline. Because this isn't about her anymore. It's about the next me. And for the first time in a long time, Jamal Davis smiled, not because he'd won, but because he was finally free. 3 months passed. Madison hadn't been the same since that meeting. The day after signing her company away, she stood in her penthouse bathroom and stared at herself for a long time in the mirror. For the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. There were cracks in her confidence now, cracks in her control. She'd built ethereal as a statement, not just about wearable tech, but about reclaiming her worth after a messy public fallout with her family. But the guilt of that day wouldn't leave her. It clung to her skin like smoke. She looked down at her wrist, the expensive Cartier bracelet that once made her feel powerful. Now, it felt like a shackle. Her assistant knocked. You've got a visitor, Miss Langford. Says his name is Jamal Davis. Madison's heart stopped. She walked out slowly, trying to steady her breath. Jamal stood at the edge of her office. No suit today. Just jeans, sneakers, clean ones, and a black hoodie that read, We Rise. His hair had grown longer. His presence was still powerful, but different. Saw the press release, he said. You donated your entire bonus to the Bronx STEM initiative. She nodded slowly. I meant what I said. I'm not that person anymore. He studied her for a long moment. I didn't come to check up on you. No. He pulled out a folder and set it on her desk. There's a school in East Harlem. Tech programs underfunded. I need someone to lead a project there. You, Madison blinked. You want me to go to a school, teach, help, he corrected. Teach. Listen, you've spent your life designing for people who already have everything. I want you to design for kids who don't. She hesitated. Why me? Because if you can look those kids in the eye after everything you've done and help them anyway, then maybe there's hope for all of us. She swallowed hard, tears threatening. You're serious? Deadly. She laughed, bitter and small. God, you're nothing like I thought you'd be. Jamal raised an eyebrow. And what did you think I'd be? Madison, still poor and angry, petty. I thought you'd hate me forever, she admitted. I did, he said plainly, for years. I hated you so much, it gave me fuel. But hate burns you up from the inside. Eventually, I realized I didn't need to punish you. I just needed to outgrow you. She looked at him with something that wasn't admiration. It was something deeper, something like shame. You did. You really did. 1 week later, Madison stood in front of a classroom in East Harlem. The desks were chipped, the paint was peeling, but the kids had fire in their eyes, hungry for hope. She clicked through a presentation. So wearable tech isn't just about fashion. It can monitor heart rates, sleep cycles, even help people with disabilities. A hand shot up. Do you use it to spy on people? The room laughed. Madison smiled. Only if they're trying to cheat on their homework. They laughed harder. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Jamal returned a month later to visit the school. He stood at the back of the classroom as Madison walked the students through building a prototype glove that could control a drone. One student, a skinny kid named Eli, looked up. "Mr. Davis, are you a billionaire?" Jamal chuckled. "I guess." Eli nodded, impressed. "And you used to wear beat-up sneakers?" Jamal smiled. "I still do sometimes." Eli looked confused. "Why?" "Because your worth isn't on your feet. Eli, it's in your hands, your head, your heart." The classroom went silent. Even Madison had tears in her eyes. Later, as they sat outside the school, Madison said quietly, "You were right, about everything." Jamal looked at her. "I don't need you to be sorry anymore. I just need you to keep showing up." "I will," she whispered. They sat in silence for a while. "I read about your mom," Madison said finally. "She passed last year." Jamal nodded, the pain flickering across his face for a moment. "Pancreatic cancer. She didn't live long enough to see the big deals, but she saw me graduate." "I'm sorry," Madison said, sincere. "She raised me to forgive," he said, "but not to forget." Madison looked down. "Do you ever wish we hadn't met?" He paused. "Sometimes, but then I remember if you hadn't said what you said that day, I might still be invisible." She wiped a tear. "And if I hadn't said it, maybe I wouldn't have turned into someone I hated." He looked at her for a long time. "We're not our worst moments, Madison, but we are responsible for them." As the sun set over Harlem, two people sat on a bench, a black man in a hoodie, a white woman in heels, both changed, both healing. It wouldn't be easy. Redemption never is. But it had begun. 3 years passed. Madison's life looked nothing like it had before. The luxury condo was gone, sold by choice. She now lived in a modest brownstone in Brooklyn. The closet full of designer labels had shrunk to a few simple outfits, half of which were purchased at local black-owned shops she supported. She hadn't posted on Instagram in over a year. The girl who once lived for likes now lived for letters, the kind she got from her students. Miss Langford, one read, scrawled in purple marker, "I want to be like you when I grow up. Except I'm going to have even more robots." She had laughed so hard she cried. But one evening, as she walked home from the East Harlem campus with a tote bag full of soldering kits, she passed a group of high school girls standing at a bus stop. They were dressed sharply, not in designer, but in carefully curated, thrifted pieces. One of them pointed at another's torn boots and said, "Girl, you need to stop shopping at Trash Couture." The others laughed. Madison stopped. Something inside her turned cold. She turned and walked straight over. "Excuse me," she said gently. The girls paused. Can we help you?" Madison looked at the girl with the boots. "Those are good boots. My favorite pair had more holes than that." The girl raised an eyebrow. "Lady, what?" Madison offered a small smile. "Just be careful what you say to each other. Sometimes words don't leave bruises you can see, but they scar just the same." She didn't wait for a response. She walked away. But behind her, one girl whispered, "Yo, I think that's the woman from the STEM program." A pause. Then, "Oh damn," elsewhere in the city. Jamal sat at the boardroom table of CoreLink's new headquarters. A sleek, three-story structure covered in solar glass and murals of black innovators from history. He wasn't the same either. His face was now on magazine covers. He'd been invited to speak at Davos. He had contracts in multiple countries and a waiting list of startups begging for investment. But he still came home every Sunday to the same block he grew up on. And he still wore those old beat-up sneakers once a month. now framed in a glass box at his office entrance, with a plaque that read where it started. That evening, his assistant, Keisha, walked in. "Someone's here to see you," she said. Didn't give a name. Said it was personal. He sighed. "Send them in." A woman walked in, elegant, late 30s, with trembling hands. It was Madison's mother. Jamal stood, stunned. "Miss S. Langford." She smiled awkwardly. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I remember a lot of things." She nodded. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not destroying my daughter." He tilted his head. "I don't destroy people. Life does that well enough. She's changed," the woman said softly. "I don't know what you did to her, but I haven't seen her this alive since she was a child." "I didn't do anything," Jamal said. "She made the choice. I just gave her a mirror." The woman teared up. "She never told me what she said to you back then, but I imagine it was terrible." He said nothing. "She used to be so kind." Jamal, before the wealth, before her father left. Jamal's expression didn't soften. "Everyone has pain, ma'am. That doesn't give you the right to pass it along." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry too." Months passed. Then came the gala, Corelink's 10-year anniversary. Every major figure in the industry was there, reporters, investors, politicians, even celebrities. But it was the final speaker that no one expected. Jamal stepped up to the mic. "Tonight," he began, "isn't about me. It's about legacy, about transformation, about redemption." He looked toward the crowd. "I want to introduce someone who once changed my life in a way I never asked for, but ultimately needed. And someone who has spent the last decade proving that people can grow beyond their worst mistakes." A hush fell over the room. Madison stepped onto the stage. There were gasps, whispers, phones raised. She wore a simple navy dress. No makeup, no heels. Just her, raw, real, human. "I don't deserve this microphone," she said. "But I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do with shame is turn it into service." She paused. 10 years ago, I mocked a boy for his shoes. I laughed while he stood humiliated. And today, that same man trusted me to help teach thousands of children that they are worthy, regardless of what they wear, where they live, or what they've lost. The room was silent. Madison looked at Jamal. "Thank you for not becoming like me, and thank you for helping me become more like you." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Jamal didn't clap. He walked forward, hugged her once, tightly, and whispered, "Now it's done." She whispered back, "No, now it begins." The next day, the gala speech had gone viral. Clips of Madison's confession, raw, tear-filled, and sincere, flooded social media. Some mocked her, others praised her, but the most meaningful responses came from the students. One girl wrote, "I used to hide my shoes at lunch. Now I wear them with pride. Thank you, Miss Langford." Another, "I told my brother what you said. He cried. He never cries." And in the middle of all the buzz, one name was on everyone's lips again: Jamal Davis. But he was nowhere to be found. He had taken a flight, not for a conference or a business deal, but to a quiet town in Alabama. There, he knocked on the door of a small white house with peeling paint. A woman in her 60s opened it. Her eyes lit up. "Jamal." He smiled. "Hi, Miss Ella." She opened her arms wide and pulled him into a tight embrace. Ella had been his second-grade teacher, the first person who told him he was meant for more. She didn't know what had happened at that school hallway years ago, but she knew what it meant to raise a black boy in a white world. "You've been on TV," she said as they sat down to tea. "Fancy suits. Talking about capital and equity and all them things." Jamal chuckled. "I never forgot your spelling tests," she smiled. "You always spelled freedom right." He looked at her. "Miss Ella, what do you do when someone changes? Really changes? When the person who broke you is also the person who helped you heal?" She took a long sip of tea. "Then maybe they didn't break you. Maybe life did. Maybe they just held up the mirror." He was quiet. "Forgiveness," she said gently, ain't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to carry the fire that burned you. Jamal closed his eyes. I don't know how to let it go. Not fully. She took his hand. Then carry it with care. Let it remind you where you came from, not where you're stuck. Meanwhile, in New York, Madison stood alone in an empty classroom after hours. The students had left. The sun was setting, and her fingers trembled as she opened an old box. Inside, a faded photograph. Her, age 12, arms crossed, sneering. And next to her, a blurred image of Jamal walking away in those same worn sneakers she used to laugh at. She hadn't realized someone had taken the photo that day. Her mother had kept it. Now it made her sick. She tore it in half, not to forget, but to let go. 2 weeks later, Jamal was back in the city. He stood on a rooftop garden at a new community center being built in Queens, a project funded by both CoreLink and Ethereal. He turned as footsteps approached behind him. Madison. She was holding 2 cups of coffee. Truce, she said. He accepted one. Always. They stood side by side, watching the workers install solar panels, raised beds, and art walls designed by local teens. I've been thinking, she said, about doing a line of streetwear with the kids. Like real collabs. They design, we produce. He nodded. Let them own the future, not just model it. She smiled. I want to name the first collection after something meaningful. Maybe after the fire. He chuckled. That sounds like a superhero origin story. Aren't we all? He looked at her, really looked. You've changed. I had to, she said, to live with myself. Good, she paused. Do you still hate me? He turned fully toward her. I never hated you, Madison. I hated what you represented. The ease, the cruelty, the power you didn't even realize you had. She nodded slowly. And now, he shrugged. Now you use that power to build things instead of break them. She didn't speak for a moment. Do you ever think, she asked, about what would have happened if I hadn't said what I said that day? He tilted his head. All the time. And I probably wouldn't be here. But that doesn't excuse it. She placed the coffee cup down. I know. A long pause. I don't want to just make things right with you, Jamal, she said. I want to make it right with the next you. And the next after that. For the kids who never get the chance. He smiled. Then let's do it together. Later that year, the After the Fire collection debuted at Fashion Week. But instead of runway models, the students who designed the pieces wore them. The spotlight was on them. Their stories, their pain, their power. Jamal sat front row, and Madison didn't take the stage. She sat beside him, hand resting over her heart, eyes wet with pride. Months later, a young reporter interviewed Jamal at a university talk. What do you say? The reporter asked. To the people who think you went easy on her, Jamal leaned back. Easy? The room stilled. She lost her brand, her ego, her armor. She faced what she did on the biggest stage possible. She spent years rebuilding not just her image, but her soul. And every day she walks into a classroom and tells kids they're valuable, not in spite of what they wear, but because of who they are. He looked at the crowd. You call that easy? The room erupted in applause. It was a rainy afternoon in the Bronx when Madison received a small, handwritten note slipped under her classroom door. It read, I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you. I'd like to talk, Amina. Madison's chest tightened. Amina, the little girl who had stood behind Jamal the day everything started. Madison stared at the note for a long time. Her fingers trembled as she folded it. Later that week, she walked into a cozy cafe near Pelham Parkway, her stomach churned with nerves. She scanned the room, then froze. Amina was seated by the window. She was grown now, mid-20s, radiant. Natural curls pulled into a bun, wearing a denim jacket with hand-stitched flowers. But the eyes were still the same, wide, watchful. Madison approached slowly. Hi. Amina looked up. Madison. Her voice was calm, but not cold. Madison sat across from her, setting her hands on the table. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I wasn't sure I did either, Amina admitted. Silence stretched between them. I still remember the sound, Amina said quietly. The sound of everyone laughing at my brother. I didn't even understand what was happening, just that something broke inside him that day. Madison swallowed hard. I know. I hated you, Amina continued. I wrote your name on a piece of paper and burned it with a match when I was 13. I prayed bad things would happen to you. Madison nodded, tears already welling. I deserve that. But then I saw the gala speech, Amina said, and I didn't recognize the girl in the video. She looked wrecked, human. I was. Amina studied her. Why now? Why after all these years? Because Jamal forgave me, Madison whispered. And then I realized I hadn't forgiven myself. She paused. And because I never apologized to you. Amina didn't speak. Madison's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Amina, for making your brother feel small, for making you watch it, for being the reason that moment haunted both of you. Amina finally spoke. Softly. He wouldn't let me bring it up for years. He said it didn't matter anymore. But I know it did. It fueled him. But it also scarred him. I see it, Madison whispered. Even now. Another long pause. Then Amina reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unrolled it gently. It was a pair of old, beat-up sneakers. Madison gasped. They're not the exact pair, Amina said. But they're the same kind. I kept them. As a reminder of what we survived. Tears spilled down Madison's cheeks. I don't want revenge, Amina said. I want peace. For me. For Jamal. For you. Madison couldn't speak. She only nodded, shaking, her shoulders trembling from the weight of it all. Then Amina did something Madison never expected. She reached across the table and held Madison's hand. 3 years later, a park opened in East Harlem, not just any park, a technology-themed playground complete with solar-powered learning, pods, augmented reality installations, and an amphitheater designed by local youth. At the center of the park stood a bronze statue. It showed a young boy, sneakers worn, head held high, standing beside a young girl, her hand on his shoulder. The plaque read, "To the ones who were mocked, and the ones who learned to love. May we all grow kinder." Jamal stood beside Amina and Madison on opening day. Reporters were everywhere, drones hovered above, but in that moment it felt quiet. Madison wiped a tear. Do you think they'll understand what this means? Jamal looked at the statue. Maybe not right away, but someday, some kid will stand here and realize their story isn't over. That pain can shape power. That forgiveness is possible. Amina smiled, her hand linking with theirs. After the fire, she said, comes the bloom. And for the first time in all their lives, they stood not as enemies, but as survivors, builders, family.